Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Dr. Vijay Bhatia. Today I'm going to talk about memory. I'm a psychiatrist and have 30 years experience of working in mental health. This is a brain. Brain receives all the information, data from the outside world, gives them a meaning, images, and stores them inside the brain, especially in the area called hippocampus. This is the picture of hippocampus. You can see it's like a horseshoe shape, and it is regarded as the storehouse of the memory, although memory is stored all over the brain, and this links with all the different areas of the brain to complete the picture of the memory. It's closely related with the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, and very much interconnected with all these. These are the nerve cells which make connections with each other, and these connections are present when we are born, but only in few numbers. As we grow, these connections become stronger, they become connected to different other areas, and they keep on developing and growing and building as we learn. So one neuron can make connection with number of different neurons, and one neuron can receive signals from number of different brain areas on its cell body. So it all depends how many connections we have, how strong are they, how quickly they can be triggered, how quickly they can receive signals. It does affect the memory. This is the connectome. That means how all the different cells in the brain are connected with each other. Brain connections, some of them are present at birth, but they are very basic one. They are controlling the breathing, heart rate, respiration, and automatic things. But on the other hand, certain things like reflexes and basic senses, if somebody is giving them a pain, they might feel the pain, but they can't identify what is the cause of the pain. Is it a sharp object, or is it something else? So as they grow, as they learn more, these connections will develop and give the meaning, and they go and keep on making new connections and make more and more connections as we grow older. So as a child, there may be few connections. As we grow in a teenage years, there is a lot of connections. However, it is said that round about teenage years, 12, 13, during early childhood, the child learns a lot of stuff that is probably not needed later in life. So some of these are pruned, some of these are disconnected, and later on, what we need remains there. So in adults, it depends upon how much learning do you have. If somebody is grown up in isolation, their connections will be comparatively less to the person who had a much wider experience of the world and the learning of the world. In old age, it is expected to decrease to some degree, but not a great deal unless you develop dementia, which is the nerve cells itself or their connections die. Therefore, the connections become weaker and the memories get worse, or it can happen after injury. What about if there are false perceptions, like you receive something, a message from the outside world which is not true? The brain doesn't probably know how to differentiate between that and will consider that as if they are perceptions, true perceptions, and sometimes still keep on making these connections for a long time? What about if there are distorted perceptions? What about the false beliefs? And what about the childhood abuse? If you are abused as a child in a foster care or in an orphanage, you will remember the person who has given you the pain and later on in the life, when you are that the other perpetrator is not there, you simply have to think about that, and that connection will be triggered, giving you same pain. If you don't get the same pain, at least you will get that emotional pain through the amygdala, and all your autonomic nervous system will be triggered. That means you will be probably breathing fast, your heart will be racing, you will have palpitations and sweating. So you simply have to think about that. That is the value of the connections of learning over the period. What is memory, by the way? It is the power or the process of reproducing or recalling what has been learned and retained, especially through associative mechanisms, as we have seen through the making the connections with number of different brain areas, number of different sense organs that has been interpreted in the brain. The store of things learned and retained from an organism's activity or experience, as evidenced by modification of structure or behavior, or by recall and by recognition. Memory is the faculty of the brain by which data or information is encoded, stored, retrieved when needed. It is the retention of information over time for the purpose of influencing future. We talked about a lot of words and phrases. What is information processing? Memory is often understood as an informational processing system with explicit and implicit functioning that is made up of a sensory processor, short-term or working memory, long-term memory. So these are two processors, as we call them. We will discuss more about this explicit and implicit. This can be related to the neuron. We saw the structure of neuron earlier and making connections with each other. The sensory processor allows information from the outside world to be sensed in the form of chemical and physical stimuli, like light falling on your eye, like waves of sound waves falling on your ear, will pass the information to the brain through the chemicals, and attended to various levels of focus and intent. So that's important, how much focus and attention you are paying to that thing. That will be making bigger and stronger connections. Working memory serves as an encoding and retrieval processor. Information in the form of stimuli is encoded in accordance with explicit or implicit functions by the working memory processors. The working memory also retrieves information from previously stored material. Finally, the function of long-term memory is to store data through various categorical models or systems. Explicit and implicit memory. The first one is declarative, or we call it explicit memory, is the conscious storage and recollection of the data. Under the declarative memory resides semantic and episodic memory. What is semantic memory? Semantic memory refers to memory that is encoded with specific meaning, while episodic memory refers to information that is encoded along a spatial and temporal plane. Declarative memory is usually the primary process thought of referencing memory. Explicit and non-explicit. So non-declarative or implicit memory is the unconscious storage and recollection of information. So did you see the difference? The explicit is the conscious and the implicit is unconscious. An example of a non-declarative process would be the unconscious learning or retrieval of information by way of procedural memory or a priming phenomena. Priming is the process by subliminally arousing specific responses from memory and shows that not all memory is consciously activated, whereas procedural memory is the slow and gradual learning of skills that often occurs without conscious attention to learning. Memory is not a perfect processor and is affected by many factors. The ways by which information is encoded, stored, and retrieved can all be corrupted. The amount of attention given new stimuli can diminish the amount of information that becomes encoded for storage. Also, the storage process can become corrupted by physical damage to areas of the brain that are associated with memory, especially storage, such as the hippocampus. Finally, the retrieval of information from long-term memory can be disrupted because of decay within long-term memory. Normal functioning, decay over time, and brain damage all affect accuracy and the capacity of the memory. Sensory memory. This holds information less than 1 second after an item is perceived. The ability to look at an item and remember what it looked like with just a split second of observation or memorization is the example of sensory memory. It is out of cognitive control and is an automatic response. There are 3 types of sensory memories. Iconic memory is a fast decaying store of visual information, a type of sensory memory that briefly stores an image which has been perceived for a small duration. Stimulation of the brain with iconic images make it possible to create images in the brain. When a person sees an action, the information picked up by photoreceptor cells located within the eyes and is sent to the brain to the occipital lobe. The other sensory memory is the echoic memory. This is a fast decaying store of auditory. So iconic is visual, echoic is auditory. Another type of sensory memory that briefly stores sounds that have been perceived for short durations, giving living organisms the capability to stimulate memories from audio waves. Audio waves help you to detect your environment and surrounding. The third type of sensory memory is the haptic memory. This is a type of sensory memory that represents for the touch. Short-term memory. Short-term memory is also known as working memory. Short-term memory allows recall for a period of several seconds to a minute without rehearsal. Its capacity is also limited. In 1956, George A. Miller conducted experiments showing that the store of short-term memory was roughly about 7 items plus minus 2 items. Modern estimates of the capacity of short-term memory are even lower, typically of the order of 4 or 5 items. However, memory capacity can be increased through a process called chunking. For example, in recalling a 10-digit telephone number, a person could chunk the digits into 3 groups. This is because we are able to chunk the information into meaningful groups of numbers. Short-term memory is believed to rely mostly on an acoustic code storing information and to a lesser extent on a visual code. Long-term memory. Long-term memory can store much larger quantities of information for potentially unlimited duration, sometimes a whole lifespan. Its capacity is immeasurable. For example, given a random 7-digit number, one may remember it for only a few seconds before forgetting, suggesting it was stored in short-term memory. On the other hand, one can remember telephone numbers for many years through repetition. This information is said to be stored in long-term memory. And encoding. While short-term memory encodes information acoustically, that is through the sound, long-term memory encodes in semantically, that is giving demeanor. This was a study done by Bhatia in 1966, discovered that after 20 minutes, test subjects had the most difficult recalling a collection of words that had similar meaning, like big, large, great, huge, long-term. Another part of long-term memory is episodic memory, which attempts to capture information such as what, when, and where. So if with episodic memory, individuals are able to recall specific events such as their birthday parties, their wedding day. So if you ask the person, where were you married? When were you married? And they will remember these things for a long time. Short-term memory is supported by transient patterns of neuronal communication, dependent on region of the frontal lobe, especially dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and the parietal lobe. Whereas long-term memory, on the other hand, is maintained by more stable and permanent change in neural connections, widely spread throughout the brain. The hippocampus is essential for learning new information, to the consolidation of information from short-term to long-term memory, although it does not seem to store information itself. It was thought that without the hippocampus, new memories were unable to be stored into long-term memory and that there would be a very short attention span, as first gleaned from patient Henry Molaison after he had a brain surgery done on his hippocampi. Both were removed. More recent examination of his brain post-mortem shows that the hippocampus was more intact than first thought, through theories drawn from the initial data into question. The hippocampus may be involved in changing neural connections for a period of 3 months or more after the initial learning. Research has suggested that long-term memory storage in humans may be maintained by DNA methylation and the prion gene. There's another model for the memory that's called multi-store model. The multi-store model, also known as Atkinson-Shiffrin memory model. This was first described in 1968. The multi-store model has been criticized for being too simplistic. For instance, long-term memory is believed to be actually made up of multiple subcomponents, such as episodic and procedural memory. It also proposes that rehearsal is the only mechanism by which information eventually reaches long-term storage. But evidence shows us capable of remembering things without rehearsal. The model also shows all the memory stores as being a single unit, whereas research into this shows differently. For example, short-term memory can be broken up into different units, such as visual information and acoustic information. In a study in 1986, a patient called KF demonstrated certain deviations from the Atkinson-Shiffrin model. That patient KF was brain damaged, displaying difficulties regarding short-term memory, recognition of sounds such as spoken numbers, letters, words, and easily identifiable noises such as doorbells were all impacted. Visual short-term memory was unaffected, suggesting a dichotomy between visual and auditory memory. Working memory consists of three basic stores: the central executive, the phonological loop, and the visuospatial sketchpad. In 2000, this model was expanded with a multimodal episodic buffer. The central executive essentially acts as an attention sensor store. The phonological loop stores auditory information by silently rehearsing sounds or words in a continuous loop. The visuospatial sketchpad stores visual and spatial information. It is engaged when performing spatial tasks, such as judging distances, such as counting the windows on a house. How can we divide the memory by information type? There's one type called topographical memory, or topographic memory. Involves the ability to orient oneself in space, to recognize and follow an itinerary, or to recognize familiar places. Getting lost when traveling alone is an example of the failure of topographic memory. The other important memory is the flashbulb memory. These are clear, episodic memories of unique and highly emotional events. So, given that the child was born in a difficult situation, the child, if you ask them who, when, where, the child will have very clear images. The child can even remember those things and can have flashbacks later life. And the same thing applies to a person, especially the military veterans going to the war. They have this episodic memory. They know exactly when, where, and what happened to them, and they're highly emotionally charged, and the person will keep on getting the flashbacks, memories, affecting their emotions and contributing towards their mental disorder as well. Declarative memories require conscious recall, in that some conscious process must call back the information. It is sometimes called explicit memory, since it consists of information that is explicitly stored and retrieved. Declarative memory can be further subdivided into semantic memory, concerning principles and facts taken independent of context, and episodic memory concerning information specific to a particular context, such as time and place. Semantic memory allows the encoding of abstract knowledge about the world, such as Paris is the capital of France. Episodic memory, on the other hand, is used for more personal memories, such as the sensations, emotions, personal associations of a particular time or place. Autobiographical memory Memory for particular events within one's own life is generally viewed as either equivalent to or a subset of episodic memory. When you were married, when is your birthday? So these are autobiographical memory. Visual memory is part of memory, preserving some characteristics of our senses pertaining to visual experience. One is able to place in memory information that resemble object, places, animal, or people in sort of some kind of mental image. Visual memory can result in priming, and it is assumed kind of perceptual representational system that can happen in post-traumatic stress disorder. The other type of memory is procedural memory. Procedural memory or implicit memory is not based on the conscious recall of information but on implicit learning. It can best be summarized as remembering how to do something. Procedural memory is primarily employed in learning motor skills and should be considered a subset of implicit memory. It is revealed when one does better in a given task due only to repetition. No new explicit memories have been formed, but one is unconsciously accessing aspects of those previous experiences. Procedural memory involves motor learning, depends on the cerebellum and basal ganglia. A characteristic of procedural memory is that the things remembered are automatically translated into action and thus sometimes difficult to describe. Some examples of procedural memory include the ability to ride a bike, tie your shoes, drive a car. Another major way to distinguish different memory functions is whether the content to be remembered is in the past, retrospective memory, or in the future, prospective memory. Thus, retrospective memory as a category includes semantic, episodic, and autobiographical memory because these are mainly in the past. The things that you have learned, the meanings you have given, your personal biography, the episodes happened in your life, they have happened in the past, they are retrospective memory, whereas prospective memory is the memory for the future and what your intentions will be in the future, remembering to remember. Prospective memory can be further broken down into event and time-based prospective remembering. Time-based prospective memories are triggered by a time cue, such as going to the doctor at 4 p.m. That is, there is an action and there is a cue. Event-based prospective memories are intentions triggered by cues, such as remembering to post a letter, which is an action, after seeing a mailbox. That is a cue. So, cues do not need to be related to the action, as the mailbox letter example, and lists, sticky notes, knotted handkerchiefs, or string around the finger all exemplifies cues people have used as strategies to enhance the prospective memory. In summary, memories are made from paying attention to the things that you are interested in, that you see, that you hear, that you feel, that you learn from outside, and you keep them and rehearse them and relearn them, and they are stored in your mind, in your brain. Some memories are emotional, highly charged, and it is difficult for you to forget them. Some of them can be quite traumatic in a way, and you don't want to remember, but that is not the way, because the more you try to forget about them, the more you are rehearsing them, therefore the connections are becoming stronger. And memories are only lost either in disease, illness, injury to the certain parts of the brain, like dementia or stroke or brain, or you distract yourself and learn other things, that your focus is on something else, so that the other memories you don't have to remember, which you don't want to remember, rather than keep on remembering something that you don't want to remember. If you try to forget the memories and in the process rehearse them, their connections become more stable, they become more hardwired, which you don't want. Thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, press the like button, share with your friends, and subscribe the channel. I see you again in my other videos.